1228th meeting of the Australian Numismatic Society, held today, Monday the 8th of August 2022. So I welcome those few members who I'm pleased to see here. And we have apologies from John Volkmeyer, Tony Hall, Lindy Hall, Ian Seisland, Les Carlisle, Robert Tonner, Ron Bolden, Barry Scott, Joe Detling, John Manukas, Mary Brad, Ross Prattley, Colin Pitchfork, Graham Howard, Barry Towers and Matthew Lloyd. And any others anybody wants to add?
I don't think there's anyone left.
Okay, no. Well,
really.
Before we go to any general business, I'll invite Rod to give us an update on John Volkmeyer's health.
Yes, I spoke with John last Saturday. I emailed him and I phoned him and I said, John, please get back to me because I want to know how you are, and the members keep asking me how you are and I'd like to let them know. So he phoned back, which was good, and he was saying he's still very weak. He still has no energy. Just walking around the house wears him out totally. He had his first session of chemo about 2 weeks ago. He said it wasn't too bad. He expected to be flattened by it, so it did knock him about a bit, but not too much, less than he was expecting. But he said with the chemo, he has to have 6 sessions. So every 3 months for the next year and a half, he has to go and have a session of chemo. So they do his blood test, they give him the chemo, and then shortly after that they do another set of blood tests just to monitor how things are going. So from what I gather, everything's in hand. They're doing what they can, and we're all just hopeful that it'll work and we shall see John with us again in due course. And just hope, we just have hope that it all works and he recovers. I spoke to Tony Hall about 6 o'clock this evening before leaving home. Tony called back. He contacted me last Wednesday and he said, Pat and I have just been tested positive for COVID. We both feel very, very tired and very exhausted, no energy. And that was last Wednesday. So when I contacted him today he was saying they progressed. They have more energy than they had then. And besides feeling exhausted and no energy, they didn't have any other symptoms. They didn't have headaches or any of the other symptoms that come with COVID. So he was happy for that. And he's hopeful that in 2 or 3 days he'll be up and about. But he was saying he still gets tired very easily, so he can't do very much before running out of energy.
Yeah, funny, when I had all my symptoms was a runny nose.
Yeah.
Until the end of the 7 days, and then the next 10 or 12 days, that's when I had no energy.
Ah, right. Well,
I just didn't want to do a damn thing, for about 10 days after.
All I had was a cough when I had it, and the cough stayed through, and I was fine.
Yeah.
I was doing everything I normally do.
I had the say, 7-day period, I was a little bit listless, I think, but mainly just the run. It couldn't stop my nose running, and that was about the only symptom.
Yeah.
But it was the period after that I just felt that.
But luckily we've all had our boosters and our jabs, and we're all up to date. So if we do catch it, and I guess the chances are we're all going to catch it.
Oh, well, that's what our doctor said. Look, even with it, you every chance of getting it again. So.
Yeah. So that's the update on John. He's still with us. He's slowly recovering. He's gained a bit of weight because he lost 9 kilos, he said, in those 2 weeks when he was very sick. So he's gained a bit back, but he still has no energy at all.
Yeah,
that's good. Good to hear in some way.
Yeah, so in a way it's
Has he got anyone
It's-
to look after him at the moment, or just by himself?
No, he lives with his daughter and grandson.
Daughter or grandson?
Yep.
Hmm.
Right, so that's the
Right,
update.
that's good. All right, well, thanks Rod for that. Give him our regards when you next see him. The whole ANS really wants him to get better, get his energy back.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, the next item on the agenda is general business. Has anybody got anything they've noticed or want to raise about things? I did notice that there's going to be an AND affair in October, Lower Sydney Town Hall as usual, isn't it? So Rod's calling for volunteers to man the table there. Just us five probably wouldn't fill the quota.
Not at the moment.
A few others by then. Fortunately, it'll probably be a bit warmer by then.
Oh, yes.
None of these late cold evenings.
We'd have gone on to daylight saving by then.
Well, we're available, but we'll wait and see
Which day?
which ones you.
I've had
Using out, sort of
a
thing.
fair few replies from people who said, yes, I can work one day, just let me know which day. So the hours are 10 to 4 on the Saturday and 10 to 3 on the Sunday. So they're not looking at these silly hours that they used to have before, where, you know, half the last 3 hours you're sitting there by yourself,
Yeah.
no one's around. So yeah.
Well, so we're available, we'll just want to confirm when you, if there's
Yeah.
any particulars.
And they have a new coordinator doing it. So the lady who used to run it, Shelley, she's no longer there. So
I'll just go through what's Rod's printed on the agenda here. The first announcement is about the next meeting, which is on Monday the 12th of September. So pretty well, so that's the usual second Monday of the month, I think.
yeah.
And it's our AGM. The topic is 21st century numismatics, which is the whole 22 years of it. And AGM, Rod, is that, well then, I mean, we'll have to get some volunteers for the committee that meets occasionally, those who come to meetings, and but you know, I think most of us are going to do what we're doing already. I'm happy to. I mentioned the AND affair. So the next one is about the next year we're going to have 3 meetings at Jim Noble's place, because he normally has 3 auctions in March, July and November now, whereas previously it was only March and November, wasn't it? We only had 2.
Yeah. Currently, we only go to 2 of the Noble auctions, the meetings before the auctions.
Yeah.
We do the March and November. We don't do the July meeting. In years past, July used to be in Melbourne, and now they've brought them all 3 to Sydney. And so I was saying to Jim when I was there last week, saying, you know, next year, can we have our A&S meeting for each of the Noble auctions and show us the highlights of each of them? So that's what we'll be doing next year.
Yeah, fair enough. No, that's good. Yes, he when he started off, after he bought the business from Spink, he used to have the middle of the year in Melbourne.
Yeah.
But I guess that just didn't get enough custom there, or perhaps these days with the internet anyway, it doesn't really matter where you are if you.
Yeah, well, still good to see the stuff in.
It is.
In
Yes,
reality.
it's always good. But when you buy overseas, as I do a fair bit,
Well, this last
I never see it. But you know, if you buy it from somebody reputable, it's always.
auction was very good. It went very well. They had this special collection, the Vermeer collection, put together by a country squire in Victoria, who gathered all these proofs and everything of English coins, and they all sold. They had one of the £5 Una and the Lion, a proof one, which was a really nice. And Jim had an estimate of 650,000 on it, and it sold for 780.
Oh.
So that was pretty good. But most of that stuff sold, and I know when I was chatting with them, they were still totting up the totals of what sold in this auction, and it's the biggest auction they've ever had because they sold over $7 million worth of stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah, I had a couple of bids in, but I got outbid.
No, yes, you got to go to the live bidding too, if you want to, if you really want to get something.
Yeah, Grant,
Well,
what did you
got-
got? You got three.
Yeah, very
Was it
rarely.
three you got?
Yeah. Okay, so that's the topics that are on the agenda list. Is anything you want to raise? Anything? I'd just say this: if this is now, of course, the midsummer of Europe, and they don't really highlights of the European sales and should we say the northern hemisphere sales, includes America too, is really in the autumn. That's where the big, exciting lots always come up. So not August, but about October. That's when they have the things. So they're the things to look at, even if you're not, interested in buying any, just to see what will be sold. And I think the dealers in Europe especially, I mean, there's so many of them now, there's always 2 or 3 sales on every day. I don't keep up with it.
Yeah.
So I haven't bought one for quite a while now, but just the same, that's when the interesting new stuff will come out. Trying to think when's the last coin yes, there were a couple of interesting sales of Crusader coins over the last year, and so I added to my collection, but there's always those coins you can't afford at the time, and when they come up you can't afford them then either. So there's always those sort of coins. But yes, so the summer, July, August, they have auctions still, but they're not the top quality, rarities that would make some sort of newsworthy interest. But on the other hand, you get bargains in those. To look. Did anybody ever look at the numisbids.com page or the 6bid.com?
Not aware of it.
Yeah, they're very good. They learn a tremendous lot from them. Just on the internet, you don't have to go anywhere to buy overseas. Just do it here. The worst thing about it is if it's in Europe and even America for that matter. If you really want to buy a coin, and my premise goes, is forget about a fixed auction. To forget about submitting a bid and walk away. You'll never get a coin like that these days. But you've got to stay up right in the early hours of the morning, and the older I get, the less and less I feel like that. So that's probably why I'm not buying anything at the moment.
Well, what's the shipping prices like? What's the postage? Well, what's the postage like from overseas?
It's quite reasonable. They never hit you low for postage. That's the least of it. And remember that if you buy something from overseas, you obviously got to pay in foreign currency, so you've got to authorise foreign currency. But there are companies which I deal with, OFX, I don't know about OFX. All you do is, they've got a website, ofx.com. I want to pay for a bill, say, that I've got in pound sterling. Or when I get the invoice, it always tells you the bank account number and everything like that. So I look at the amount I've got to pay, I dial up their website, I log in, so you've got to log in to have an account with them, and you just type in the amount you want, and they give you a quote in Australian dollars there and then, bang. And all you do is just do a BPay to them, just like paying a bill. And you've got to fill in the form about who you want you send to. They'll only do bank transfers, no cheques or cash or anything like that. But that's how you buy it, and it's easy. It probably takes, because of, especially in Europe or in Britain, if I do it in the morning, by the time the BPay's gone through, that takes the longest bit, just to get them out of our bank to their bank here. By the time that's gone through, it's just the bank opening hours in their time, and they get it the same day. So, and then you've got to wait a while, posting and packaging. But the danger is, oh yes, another thing I meant to tell you, overseas, their equivalent GST, like VAT, is type double hours, 20%.
Well,
But they've all got export incentives. They don't have to charge Australian customers VAT at all. theoretically though, when it comes here, you're supposed to pay GST on it. But these days the volume of mail is so terrific, they never even ask you anymore. They just give it, they just send it on. So you get the best of both worlds. You don't have to pay tax in either place. Unless, of course, you want to make a song and dance about it and say, look, I really should pay this GST. And of course, if they ask me, I'll pay it. So there's a few pluses in it. Okay, well, that's enough about that. Tonight's topic, science and scientists, and recent acquisitions. Have you got any? Anybody, have you got something, Frank?
Yeah.
Rod's got something, I think, too. What's he just gone and put the kettle on, has he? That's
Well,
jumping.
he's just trying to check if it's probably boiled.
Right, what about you, Peter? You got anything?
Yeah, great.
Oh,
I'm going to show it for
yeah,
Peter.
they show great. Okay, all right. Okay. Well, wait. As you see, I've got a few things to show too. None of which feature scientists, but there's a story just to show. Okay, so we're on to the science and scientists and recent acquisitions. So do you want to just, if you've got recent acquisitions, just tag them on to what you want to say? Do you want to go, who wants to go first, Frank? Or
Oh.
Frank? Frank, yeah. Go.
Well, you've already seen the recent acquisitions.
Oh, yeah. That's right.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay, the first one I've got is the at home, of course, is on the $50. We have Howard Florey, who must be got this off Wikipedia. So it's not my words. Howard Walter Florey, Baron Florey, got a from 1898 to 1968 was an Australian pharmacologist and pathologist who shared the Nobel Prize in Physiology and Medicine in 1945 with Ernst Chain and Sir Alexander Fleming for his role in the development of penicillin. Although Fleming received most of the credit for the discovery of penicillin, it was Florey who carried out the first clinical trials in 1941 at the Radcliffe Infirmary in Oxford on the first patient, a police constable from Oxford. Now, I don't know whether he had anything against the police or not, whether he made him a guinea pig or... It was Florey and Chain who actually made a useful and effective drug out of penicillin after the task had been abandoned as too difficult. So that's a bit more about his actual life and what have you, but I think that pretty much covers Mr. Florey. There's yours. And follow up on him, we have Joseph Banks.
Yes.
Now, on our $5, now Sir Joseph Banks was the first baronet. He lived from 24th of February to the 13th of February, 1743 to 1820. He was an English naturalist, botanist and patron of the natural sciences. Banks made his name on the 1766 natural history expedition to Newfoundland and Labrador. He took part in Captain James Cook's first great voyage, visiting Brazil, Tahiti, and after 6 months in New Zealand, Australia, returning to immediate fame. So like we're all pretty well aware of Joseph Banks. We've got so many Banksias and various trees and whatever in Australia, so we've got him to thank for.
I don't think he gets enough credit though. You know, we all talk about Darwin and evolution and what next, but it was Banks who really got them all started with the sort of sciences.
So a bit more of his life story there. Following up with the English £1 note, which has Sir Isaac Newton. There's a feature on that. And Isaac Newton from 1642 to 1727, best known for having invented the calculus in the mid to late 1600s. most of a decade before, Leibniz did so independently and ultimately more influentially, for having formulated the theory of universal gravity. He had quite a few of these theories to his name. I did have it written, but I've lost it in the translation somewhere along the line. He had the 3 laws of motion, being the basic principle of modern science, and I forget what they were, something about an object at rest wants to remain at rest or something unless it's hit by something else, and all that type of thing.
So each action does an equal and opposite reaction. Yes.
So that's sort of his field. The one that I found a bit surprising was the on the Indian 2 rupee note, they're big into satellites. The one shown there, it's a very rough old note and a bit hard to see. But that's Arabhata was India's first satellite, named after the famous Indian astronomer. It was launched on the 19th of April 1975 from Kasputin Yar, a Soviet rocket launch and developed site in Astrakhan Oblast using Cosmos 3M launch vehicle. It was built by the ISRO, which would be probably the equivalent to our CSIRO, and launched by the Soviet Union as part of the Soviet Intercosmos program, which provided access to space and friendly stars. So there's a little bit more on that. So the fact of India, it's something I wouldn't have thought of myself, as being in the that sort of field. Now, this one, the yes. Indonesia, we have, I couldn't find anything on this. It's aircraft, and they which I do could bring in as a bit borderline, but science as far as the air and air flight and that type of thing. But surprisingly, the market, Indonesia is among the 5 fastest growing aviation markets in passenger movements per year, so on and so forth. But then what they're actually doing there, it appears to be assembling aircraft and what have you, but I couldn't see anything that sort of explained what they're actually doing and what type of aircraft it is and what have you.
Looks like a 3C.
But, so just that they are obviously involved in it. And the next one is a banknote from Laos, or Laos, whichever way you like to say it, is a 500 lakh Lao kip. Now again, couldn't really find anything on it at all, apart from its obviously power generation by water generation. But the surprising that they provide 544% of their own annual consumption, so they export a hell of a lot of electricity, and so they've got plenty of rivers and what have you for doing that with. And then a little bit along the Mexico, we have a 500 peso note, which has the Aztec or Mexica calendar on it. It's the calendrical system used by the Aztecs as well as other pre-Columbian peoples of central Mexico. It is one of the Mesoamerican calendars, sharing the basic structure of calendars from throughout the ancient Mesopotamia. There's also the Aztec sunstone, also called the calendar stone, is on display at the National Museum of Anthropology in Mexico City. The calendar consists of a 365-day calendar cycle called something year count, and a 260-day ritual cycle, a day count. These two cycles together form a 52-year century, sometimes called the calendar round. the whatever that word is in Mexican or whatever it is considered to be the agricultural calendar, since it is based on the sun and is considered to be a sacred item. Next one again is one of those, another one that I could really find very little on it at all. It's a Morocco 5 dirhams. And all I could find is there's 100 cents, satim, so a dirham, and the country is very rich in minerals. Now, I can only imagine that that's some sort of production line, you might say, which would involve science to some degree if there's only knew just what the material is that they're handling. I thought at first it might have been coal in there, but that coal doesn't get a mention in their...
Morocco is a very, very mineral-rich country.
And the interesting part, without being able to interpret, but I think that the wording across the bottom is something about if you try to forge these notes, it's on pain of death. Something about a falsification. So whether it's a pain of death or long time in jail or something. But
Prosecuted with vigour, I translated.
something of that nature. And following up here was the Syria £50 as a water wheel, which brings in aquatic sciences, I suppose you might say. These water wheels is called the Norias of Hama, spelled H-A-M-A. There's a series of 17 of them. They're actually water raising machines for irrigation along the Orontes River in the city of Hama in Syria. They're tall water wheels with box-like water collection compartments embedded around the rims. As the river flows, it pushes these water collection boxes underwater where they quickly fill up, then are driven to the top of the wheel where they empty into an aqueduct. The aqueduct can carry the water to supply buildings, gardens and farmland. They way back, they're supposed to be up to something like 500 years old. So they've been around for quite some time, so I'd say those ones that are there now, they'd be probably had a lot of repairs done to them in that time. It's, again, the last one is the Vietnam. I couldn't find very much on it at all either. I was hoping Ross might have been here tonight. They might be able to guide me as where there might be a better link to find some of these things. So I tried all sorts of notations, you know, what's the picture on and what's the motive on and all that sort of stuff. But a couple of them I did come up with.
Looks like an electricity grid,
a list
doesn't
of
it?
countries and blah blah, but then very few countries. But again, a bit surprising that Vietnam increasingly relies on coal imports, like everyone else is stopping coal. But you know, if this is up to date as we can get, sort of thing, they're saying, well, they're still big on coal. And more than half of Vietnam's electricity generation came from coal in 2020. And they got 73 power plants operating on hydro, thermal, gas and renewable sources. And 48 of those powerhouses have capacity greater than 30 megawatts. Now, I'm not too sure just how big a megawatt is, but so they
30 million watts.
Put us to shame, but you know, for the size of the country to have that many power plants, it's unbelievable. And, that's my contribution.
George, do you want to...
Want to go? Do Peter first?
Just remind George about the topic and whether he wants to...
George?
Can't hear you.
It got his ears in.
No.
Do you have anything to show on science?
No.
No?
Okay, Grant.
What about Grant? Grant's going to show something for Peter
Yeah.
when he takes the picture.
One second.
Or do you want to talk? Rod, at this stage?
Don't mind.
Whatever.
This is it.
Yeah.
Okay. Tuvalu. Yeah. So Peter has brought in a Tuvalu $1 silver coin. It's 1 ounce and it shows the periodic table. If you don't know, Peter collects all the different metals that are in the periodic table that he can find. You've got quite a good collection. You've shown us quite a few of the other ones. The periodic table was there. The Russian chemist is referred to. Dmitry Mendeleev is referred to as the father of the periodic table and is credited with formalizing the arrangement of the chemical elements in 1869. So it's been around a long time. And I think we're still adding, we're still finding elements to add to it. No?
Yeah, is that another one?
They're still trying to, but they're up to 118 elements.
Right. So
And they go beyond that.
that looks. Might see if I can get a closer shot of the coin.
There you go.
I like that. They use the different sides to 150 years.
Does they happen to be in the right order, or they've been moved around?
No, they're a bit around, repeated, just to make 150 years, that's
Yeah.
Yeah.
what they're trying to do.
Only the AR and the
But they,
NE for
NE.
neon, etc.
I think they are all,
But it looks good.
They're all valid symbols, but they've used what they could.
they're all elements that belong to the periodic table, but anything that doesn't go into the sentence doesn't get put in.
How many are there all together?
Oh,
118.
118.
Yeah.
Didn't they, when they had the kaleidoscope in Europe, that when they did the Big Bang thing, didn't they find some more elements in that when they...
They've made a few, but they can't get past 118. But one more would start a new period, and
they can make them artificially, but they,
Mm.
if the heavier they are, the less stable they are, so they
Yeah,
don't last long.
They were talking about is it, dark matter or something. They were looking at
It was produced at the Perth Mint.
the basic building blocks of elements or something. There at one stage I heard something. Because they wanted to look for materials for spacecraft. And they know like that new satellite, the electronic telescope they've just put up there, it's been whacked by, they reckon, a tiny, tiny little meteor, and it's taken out one panel completely, even though they did all this testing here on Earth and fired all sorts of stuff at it as fast as they could here on Earth. But this thing in space has gone straight through one of the panels
Right.
and taken it out. But they reckon that with what fuel it's got on board, which it's got enough power to last another 50 years out there and all this sort of stuff. And they reckon by the time it's done its 50 years, it'll be absolutely shotgun with holes, the whole satellite.
Yeah. Okay, Rod, would you have a go? I'll go last if
Okay. Well, I've duplicated some of Frank's. What I brought in were banknotes, Australian banknotes, that are coming up in the next auction. So, like we saw with Frank, we have two of the Howard Florey notes that will be coming up. They're uncirculated notes with running numbers, so that's even better. So we look forward to seeing them in the next auction. Also, there's a nice uncirculated, at least I think it's uncirculated, $20 note, and it shows John Hargraves. Hargraves, besides being sort of the discoverer of gold, he was also heavily into aviation, and he built a whole series of box kites and other bits with aviation. The $2 note. We have 4 $2 notes here. They're both running numbers, and between them they have 5 numbers, consecutive numbers, except they're missing the middle one. So God knows where the middle note disappeared. Probably someone spent it. But on one side of the $2 note, we have John MacArthur, and he's sort of credited with the merino sheep, but we all know it's his wife Elizabeth who really did all the work, and he just went around and managed there. So MacArthur's on one side, and Farrah's on the other, and sort of Farrah is credited with wheat, with propagating and producing, improving the wheat that we had here. The other paper note that we had is a very interesting one that actually has, I've only got the one note. Again, this is going to be in the next auction by the same vendor, not me. I'll be buying them, I hope. We have John Tebbit on one side, and he was an astronomer. He had his telescope out in the Penrith area, I believe. I think it's still there, isn't it?
I think it's closer to Windsor, wasn't it?
Yeah. And on the other side, we have Mawson, who of Antarctic fame, who went out and explored Antarctica and managed to survive a winter in there after he and his colleagues got separated. So, as an Antarctic explorer, he probably is a good scientist, and what happens there. So, those are my few.
Good geologist, of course.
And, you know, we...
Is it correct the hut down there was actually I think it's classified as a prefab? It was designed back in Sydney or Melbourne. They actually built it, then took it down and assembled it, so it actually comes under as a prefab. So it's the first,
IKEA.
yeah, a prefab structure in Antarctica.
Well, I guess basically you're never going to find the raw materials down there, so you had to take everything with you.
There's no Bunnings, that's for sure.
Yeah. Just check if we need more water.
Where shall I stand?
Like my phone.
If I stand there, I'll be in the front of it. I might just sit next to Rod if that's all right. Then I can pass him the stuff and see what I'm looking, and see what I'm what's on the screen instead of twisting around all the time. Just okay to do it from here?
Yeah,
and
sure.
I've got some coins here. As you see, you've got a pile of coins. When I thought about what I should show, I realised, of course, that, you know, a lot of what I collect is well before the sort of recognised scientists, and even if there were, they'd never put pictures of famous men other than rulers on coins. So I thought, well, you know, who's a really interesting scientist? And I thought Isaac Newton would be the man to talk about. You've always already introduced him as having his portrait on the £1 English banknote, which is not current anymore. Of course, I don't think they have pound notes anymore. They pound coins. You know, it's only less than $2. So I thought, well, the shot would be. I think Newton lived in very interesting times, and so I thought I'd just go through the coinage over his lifetime and see what he would have touched and worked with. And it's, you didn't mention it, Frank, but Newton was a very productive scientist, and he became famous during his lifetime. And towards the end of his lifetime, because scientists, and especially mathematicians, the best part of their lives is usually from late teens to 20 to 30. After that, it's about recap, and that's when they make all their brilliant discoveries, and that's true of Newton too. But he was so famous towards the end of his life, he was put in charge of the Royal Mint for 30 years. he managed the mint. It was meant to just be, you know, like what they call a sinecure. That is a job he didn't really have to tend to, but, you know, he'd still get paid type of thing to keep him busy. But no, he put his a lot of energy into the coin. So he has got that much of an association with the English coinage of the period. I'll just remind you of the dates. You mentioned them, Frank, but 1642 he was born. Christmas Day 1642. 1642, yes. And he lived till 1727. So in fact, 84 years. He had a very, for those days, the 17th, 18th century, that was a long life. And he was, you know, he was, by the end of it, of course, he was famous. And he's got, his tomb is in Westminster Abbey, among the great Englishmen. And he's got his own, that's where he's buried, in Westminster Abbey. And anyway, so what I've got here, and if I just put forward to you the coins, I've got, first of all, his birth year. What was happening in 1642? Here's a coin. This is one of my lovely coins. It's a beautiful coin, this one. But I'll show you that. Put it there so you can see 1642. Now this happens to be, in the 1642, the English Civil War was going on. Cavaliers versus Roundheads, and Parliament versus the King. And this coin here is a 10 shilling piece. X for X, 10 shillings.
That'd be a huge amount.
1642, it was the year it was made, and here the forces of Parliament were chasing the Cavaliers, the forces of the King around, and this was minted in Oxford, and Oxford £half. And if you're wondering what the legend, this is called a legend type, Relig Prot, the Protestant religion. This is sort of the declaration. Legang, the laws of England. Liber Par, the liberty of Parliament. So, a bit of a mixed message there, but just the same, that was the declaration.
So, but 1642, 10 shillings would be a huge amount.
It is, £half. That's right, and £1 was huge. But this was minted, the thing was minted. Why a big silver coin like that? Because he was running short of money, or they all were, and they'd go to a castle and they'd take the plates, which were made of silver, and they'd make coinage out of the plates. So it's not exactly a siege coins, they came later. But now the other side, as you see, is King Charles I on horseback, trampling the weapons, I think, of his opposition. Carolus, DG, Magbrit, you know, and so on. I won't go on with it, but that is a whopping coin. A friend of mine is in Melbourne. He's a member of the Victorian Numismatic Association, NAB, and he's got a pound. He bought it from Jim Noble, a pound. It's not much bigger, but it's thicker. It's twice as thick, so you can imagine. Worse than Cartwell Kelly's pennies. Anyway, that's the first one, 1642. He was born in Grantham, Lincolnshire. He was born posthumously. In other words, his father had died when he was born. And his mother, his mother lived with him only till he was 3, and then she went and remarried, and she left him with his grandmother. And eventually, the second husband died, and she came back and looked after him. But in those early years, he went to the King's School in Grantham, and he wasn't a particularly academic child or anything like that. Nothing special there, precocious. But people must have recognised some talent in him, because they kept on encouraging him to finish his schooling. And at age 7, 1649, King Charles was executed. As you remember, King Charles was executed by forces, people associated with Oliver Cromwell, and the Commonwealth of England was set up. So this is the period without any king at all. And so I've got a shilling of the Commonwealth, hammered shilling. Just as that was a hammered thing. We're on the crux here between hammered and milled coinage. This is towards the end of the hammering, and this one is a hammered shilling of the Commonwealth of England, it says. And there's the shield of England with the wreath around it, plum and laurel, I think. And it's a bit dug on the edges and so on, but it's a good clear shilling. And you'll see that on the other side. You've got the shield of Ireland, as well as the English coin, XII, 12 pennies, 1651, God with us. No Latin for the roundheads. No, it had to be English. This is so 1651. So he's 9 at that stage. Isaac Newton. I don't know if he ever come across with a shilling. Probably too much to give a boy, as it was still a reasonably valuable thing. But a few years on, I've got a half crown, similar design. They're all these are similar designs, but the half crown is a bit thicker and a bit bigger. 1560, what is 15? Oh, the date's on the other side. Yes, 1656, and it's II, 2 shilling, VI, 2 and 6pence. Okay, now the Commonwealth lasted till the death, basically till the death of Oliver Cromwell. His son Richard Cromwell took over for a year, but the trouble with the Puritans, and they were called this because they were a bit of wowsers, not much joy, always going to church, singing hymns, whatever, no dancing, no singing, no fun. And when they invited King Charles, who was the son of Charles, had been away and staying in Holland most of the time, I think, and invited him back to be king, well, that's when the party started. Suddenly, all the theatres opened, and lots of fun things going on. And
make up for lost time.
So that was that. But just before that, before Oliver Cromwell died, in the late years of his reign, milled coinage was starting to come, and I have here a milled shilling of Oliver Cromwell with portrait. Some people just call these patterns, but they did in fact circulate, and this is a lovely coin. That's what he looked like, pretty dour. But
He's going for a
here we are.
Caesar-esque.
Oliver Degra, so he was still, by the grace of God, he was protector of the Commonwealth in England. And Scott, him, and protector, yeah. The reverse is quite nice too. And here we are, 1658. So they're quite valuable. The rarest ones, of course, the big crowns and half crowns of Oliver Cromwell, but the shilling's pretty. It's only one I've got of this type in the collection, so I'm very pleased with that one. Anyway, along comes the Fun King. Now at this point, Isaac Newton has finished his schooling basically, and he gets a chance to go to university, Cambridge University. And they're encouraging him to do that, and he has to go, and he has to first couple of years he has to work his way through, but eventually he was so good he got a scholarship which gave him 4 years to get his Master of Arts. So he had his Bachelor of Arts and Master of Arts. So that was the degree they gave. No science. They didn't even know about science in those days. And anyway, here's a lovely shilling of Charles II. Charles, he's the Fun King. What do they call it? That's probably the wrong word, but there's a title, isn't he? He's considered a really good king, and yes, all the theatres on Drury Lane and so on, they all opened, and playwrights started to write plays again. Nothing had happened since the days of Shakespeare. And it's a lovely shilling too, and the dates are on the bottom, 1663, so early. And 1660, I've got a few notes here. So 1662, he was 20, Isaac Newton, so 21 when that coin. And he was just starting his university education. He hadn't done all that much by then, but at this point he started to get enthusiastic about it. So yeah, we'll carry on. So it was during that decade, and think about what happened in that decade, 1660 to 1670. 1665, the Great Plague of London. 1666, the Great Fire of London, and the old Gothic St Paul's Cathedral burnt down. And in the meantime, during this, he was studying, and he was very active at Cambridge, and he got his MA. And then even 1 year after he got his MA, his genius was so recognised that the professor of mathematics at Cambridge wanted to retire, invited Newton to take over. Just 1 year after he's got his master's degree. He was so good, and that was his most productive period in that decade. And as you said, Frank, he was into everything. He was into mechanics, geometry, calculus, optics. He was the one who discovered that light could be split into colours through a prism, all those sort of things. So, and he ended up writing books. He didn't write too much in these two. He was too busy doing the invention and discovery. But eventually he did write two main books. One, Principia, which is all about the mathematics and geometry and so on, and another one in optics. But they were published later in his life, we'll come to that. But laws of motion, all the laws of gravity, how the planets moved, he discovered all of that. He built the first practical reflecting telescope out of convex mirrors. Discovered the laws of cooling, what a Newtonian fluid flow, invented calculus. You're right about this Leibniz, Germany, they had a bit of an argument who invented it first. But certainly they did it separately anyway. So, and he did a lot of mathematical things. The binomial theorem, those sort of a plus b squared. How do you work that out in terms of a and b? He worked all that, not just for squared, but for any integer power you like. And he went when he was there. He was at Trinity College. So he was doing all this stuff, yeah, and he got famous. Okay, now the next coin I've got is a later coin of yes, I took the opportunity to show you my guinea coins. Here's a guinea of Charles. Not the greatest, but still nice to have. And later in Charles, so Charles is looking a bit older now, I think. But Isaac Newton is not so old at this point. He's he's still a young man. It's during the whole reign of Charles II. eventually Charles dies, and his brother, the Duke of York, James, who became James II, is a guinea of him.
Sorry, what was the value of the coin?
A guinea.
What was the value of the coin?
A guinea.
Guinea.
A guinea. Why was it called a guinea? Because it's made from gold from the African coast.
Yeah,
Guinea. Ghana. Gold Coast. In Ghana. Ghana is still one of the major producers of gold in the world. Yes, it's not as much as Australia. Australia's about the biggest producer of gold, but Ghana is still in the top 10 in the world in producing gold. And yes, most of the gold came from there, associated with the slave trade, obviously. And yeah, they start all these coins from now on are milled. And Guinea was during the time of Newton, actually, as master of the mint, that he there was sort of fixed that you were never allowed to ask more than 21 shillings for a guinea. So that defined the value of the guinea. And later on, when they made the sovereigns, they reduced them to £1. So the guinea was always slightly a bigger, heavier coin. And the interesting thing about the Guinea series, apart from the portraits, is the shields. The reverses are all different, especially the shields themselves, especially when there's new blood introduced. And of course, James didn't last too long, but it was in the reign of James that Newton published Principia, 1687, which is about, I think, the last year of James. He only ruled for 3 years. And the trouble with James, his mother had brought him up to be a Catholic. She never thought he'd be king. Charles was brought up to be Protestant because he was going to be an English king. See, but James was brought up to be a Catholic, and he wanted to stay a Catholic, and they hated him for it. I don't know why, but anyway, that's the way it was. They didn't want the Pope introduced again, so he was the Whigs, as they were called, a political party which Newton belonged to. He was a Whig. They connived with the stadtholder of Holland, who'd married the sister. That is, so we have Charles, we have James, 2 brothers, have a sister, I've forgotten her name now, but Mary, I think it was, yes, Mary. She'd married the ruler of Holland, who was the first cousin. So they were invited to come to England, a time called the Glorious Revolution, and James had to flee to Ireland, where he was defeated by William in the Battle of the Boyne. So there was a lot going on, and in the meantime, Newton's carried on in Cambridge, almost oblivious to all of this. But anyway, suddenly William and Mary, as co-regents, were on the throne, and I have here a really nice half crown of William and Mary, 1693. Not the F or anything like that, but still a pleasing coin. That's how they were. And of course, Mary was the daughter of James, whereas William was the cousin, the daughter of his sister. The son of his sister, son of his sister. But there they are. He was nevertheless given pride of place on the coinage, and William and Mary, by the grace of God. And it's a half crown, and on the other side it's quite a complex design. That's the right way up too. You see the Dutch escutcheon in the middle. So there's always things going on with the shield. You got the Lions of England, the Rampants of Scotland, the Harp of Ireland, and the ring in the Lilies of France. But in the middle there's a rampant line of Holland. And there's those complex figures, complex sort of interlinear things like that. That's WM.
William
one
and
on top
Mary.
of the other. William and Mary. And the date, 1693. Can you see how the date is? 1693. Around the escutcheon in the middle.
Oh, yeah.
Got the date?
Oh, yeah.
So what was Newton doing in 1693? He was getting on. He was getting on, in fact. And that reminds me that I have one of the best portraits ever, and I'm not sure where the original is, probably in the National Portrait Gallery in Trafalgar Square, but just sort of change it for a minute. So this is Newton at age 46, and one of the most nicest portraits of him. You can see there's intensity behind the face there, and yeah. 46. So he'd already had his really active period of scientific discovery, and he was getting famous now. And you know, he was made at this stage. When was he made? So 1672. That's in the reign. That's in the reign of the reign of Charles. He was made a Fellow of the Royal Society. Very so important honour. And later on, he became actually president of the Royal Society, and he served till he died. That was in perpetual till he died. So, yeah, he also had 2 terms as MP for the University of Cambridge, so Member of Parliament, 1689 to 1690, so just before that coin. But nevertheless, the time of William and Mary. And then later on in 1701 to 1702, he was also a Member of Parliament. Yeah, so we'll carry on. This is a hard coin to get. I had that little hole in my collection of guineas for a long time. Eventually got it at a Swiss auction not so long ago. The William and Mary guinea. So just show the one. Is it? Oh yes. Might need to focus up. It's similar to the half crown, I guess, different on the reverse. But not as good as in quality as the others, but nevertheless, it's still good fine, and it's round, and it's got the milled edge and everything. You read all the inscriptions. The other side's probably better. Not much. But it's also got the different variety of the shield with the lines and lilies sort of together, not lines and lilies, leopards and lilies, and the harp and the Scottish rampant lion, and that's 1694, is it? I can't quite hear. 4, I think it is. I think that's the year, yeah, 1694. It's got some, I think it's a bit mangled there. That's the year Queen Mary died. There it is, 1694, yeah. So she died before he did, even though she was the direct descendant of James. But nevertheless, the rule was that William would still continue as King of England by himself till he died. And so the next one would be a William guinea by himself. Yeah, he had a broken nose sort of thing. I don't know if he got that in the fighting. But it's quite not a bad coin, that one. And once again you get the different shields on the. He's back to the sort of English standard now instead of that big composite shield for the joint rule. So England, what had happened with William here? There was. Anyone see that movie called The Favourite? Anyone watch that one with Olivia Colman playing Queen Anne? Yeah, that was wonderful. Anyway, now we're getting into that time, and what was going on is that the King of Spain had died without any heirs, and there was a big dispute as to who should be the King of Spain, and how they, so basically the whole map of Europe was rearranged here because they had what was called the War of the Spanish Succession. There were a couple of candidates, they're fighting each other, and the Duke of Marlborough was over on the continent with an English army, part of the coalition against Spain and against France, because King Louis was on the throne, Louis the Great, Louis XIV, on the throne of France, and he wanted his grandson to be it, but nobody wanted France to have everything that Spain did as well as everything they had. So it was a big thing. Anyway, a lot of battles fought, especially on the borderlands between Belgium and France. That the Duke of Marlborough was involved, and the favourite movie was all about his wife having to be really good friends with the Queen to continue supporting the English army on the continent. And that was when the Battle of Blenheim was fought, 1704, I think it was.
Sarah Churchill, yeah.
And yes, so a lot going on, but in the meantime, at this point here, 1701, 1702, Isaac Newton was in Parliament. 1705, he was knighted. So it wasn't Sir Isaac Newton till 1705. And Queen Anne, on a visit to Cambridge, made him a baronet. Okay, now he was getting on a bit now. This was age 46, and you know, this is now 1700. He's in his 60s. No, not quite. In late 50s. So he's still okay. Anyway, what happens now? He essentially retires from work, having published his books. He published a book on optics in 1704, just a year before he was knighted. He was made warden and then master of the Royal Mint. And he also became president of the Royal Society in 1703. Now the interesting thing about Queen Anne, if you know that she got two types of coinage. In what happened in 1706, the United Kingdom was made. This is the first time. England and Scotland were joined as the United Kingdom, and the UK. And the coinage changed, because instead of now having a separate shield for England and one for Scotland, they joined the two by squeezing them up together. And you always saw it joined from now on. And the ones before United Kingdom, like the guineas, they're almost all the coins before the United Kingdom of Queen Anne are rarer than after. So this one's an after, but just the same. If anyone got a coin of Queen Anne with Vigo on it, Vigo was
silver.
A battle in Spain, a place in Spain, northern Spain. They pinched the Spanish silver and made English coinage out of it, but that was pre-United Kingdom. Anyway, so he carries on here as master of the mint. At this point, he's very interested in alchemy. He hopes that he can, looking at all this gold and silver kicking around, he hopes he can make some out of base metal. That was the challenge for alchemists. Unsuccessful, probably just as well, but he put a lot of effort into it. And I mentioned the gold standard. Now, okay, what happens next? Along comes now Queen Anne. If you remember the movie, she had all these kids. She had about 20 kids. They all died in there as children or babies, or didn't make it. I don't know how long the youngest were, but when she died, no heirs at all, and they had to go down through all the previous, who now belongs, and they end up with the Elector of Hanover, a German. He was the next in line to the English throne because she didn't produce any living kids at that point. So she died in 1713, I think, 1713. And at that point they had to go to Hanover and ask the Elector if he'd come over and be King of England. Well, that was probably being, King of England in those days was probably still better than just being a mere, Marquis or whatever he was. But anyway, George I came over to England, much to the annoyance of Scots, of course, and Rob Roy's story is all about that. Now I don't have a guinea of George I, but I have a half guinea and a quarter guinea, and they're both lovely little coins. So here's a half guinea, and these were probably made when Newton was the mint master. So here we are. The quarter guinea is absolutely gorgeous. It's almost like a uncirculated coin. Beautiful little coin it is. And then lastly I have, second lastly, I have a shilling too. This is a late shilling, almost at the end of his life. This shilling is dated 1725. I couldn't find one 1727, but the shilling is as close as I've got to the end of his life. So, and it's got. This days the shillings often had things in the corners on the reverse, and this is called this has got roses and plumes. Roses and plumes mean it's probably a mixture of English, it's the roses, and plumes, the Welsh coin, Welsh silver. And there's the reverse of the coin. So
they're still claiming France. They've still got the fleur-de-lis thing.
They carried on with the fleur-de-lis till well into the 19th century.
Yeah, until George III.
And the last one really is
George
a very interesting thing, I think. It's a half crown, just a similar date. I think that's 1723, Still the mint master. 4 years of life left, so he must have been 81 at this point. And if you look at the reverse, the other side, you see those letters in the
SS, South Sea Company.
SSC, the South Sea Company. The South Sea Company was formed in the days of Queen Anne to basically trade in slaves. They had a monopoly of slaves to deliver to all the Americas, both South and North. So they made a fair bit of money, and they got this. Eventually, they took over the English national debt at one point. That's how, because they run out of silver and they supplied it. That's what the SSC is on the coinage, 1723. What happened then? What was I going to say?
Went bust.
They had a problem. In 1720, they had what they call the South Sea Bubble. Well, it was like everyone wanted to get shares of this, and then when they bid up the price, it was like the Bitcoin of the 18th century, you know, very on buying worthless stuff eventually, and they had a big bust. And Newton, who was a wonderful scientist but a terrible investor, had £20,000, like equivalent of about £500,000 these days. He had that in the South Sea Company, and he lost the lot, 20 grand. So even though he was good at making coins, he wasn't so much good at investing them. And the fact that he was rich enough to have that much money said something about it. Now I just should finish up. I've got a little book here. I got it in England. A friend just gave it to me when I admired it. I was surprised at that. But it's Morocco bound. This is a book written at the time of Newton and printed at the time of Newton, actually. There's the front page. Yeah, there you go. There's the front page. So Anno Domini 1700. Turn of the century, but in fact if you look at the fine print down there, it says this is the third edition printed in 1723. So it's gone through a few things. But it's a scientific book. Now natural philosophy is what Newton studied, you know. They didn't call it science in those days. Natural philosophy was what it was all about. And this was the University of Oxford, not the University of Cambridge. He'd left Cambridge by then, but nevertheless he was still a famous man. And notice it said demonstrations of Monsieur Huygens. Huygens, that's a Dutchman who worked on centrifugal force and optics, and he was a scientist of the day too, but a bit after Newton. But I would like to finish up by just reading you a little bit of what it says here, if I can. It's hard to read because instead of S's they use these things that look like F's and everything, but and the book's falling apart. But this is, he talks about it, he gives an introduction. He says here, after he's spoken about the early scientists, he said, I should proceed in enumerating the merits of others towards the real philosophy. If I did not myself find myself obliged to stop to mention the great inventions of Sir Isaac Newton, whose prodigious genius has laid open more and abstruser mysteries of nature than men could have ever hoped for. But since it is impossible to comprehend his discoveries within the narrow limits of this preface, we shall only undertake to say thus much, that what all our predecessors from time immemorial have banded down to us concerning the mechanical philosophy does not amount to 1/10 part of those things which Sir Isaac Newton alone, through his vast skill in geometry, has found out by his own sagacity. Sagacity, okay. And that's his summary of Newton. So Newton was a genius. That's finished. Thank you very much. All right, so thank you for the privilege of showing you my nice guineas too, because
Beautiful.
they're took me a long time to get those.
Yeah, sure.
And yes, I'd Unfortunately, most of them also issued 2 guineas and 5 guinea pieces, and that's too expensive. Can't have any of those at all. That's as far as I'll go, I think, in my lifetime.
So where did you say he was born?
1642,
Where?
we're in Grantham in Lancashire. And he went to the king.
Oh, there, yeah,
Yeah.
Right. Yeah, but I just, while I was sitting there, I think, no, that this said something else, but that
Yeah,
was...
just one of those things I remembered.
Hmm.
No, that's a straight off Wikipedia and printed out. Yeah, so I feel sorry for him a bit for losing all his money, but at the point, that stage he didn't need it. He didn't have any kids, by the way, he just never married. So he'd given all his money away by then anyway.
What he had left?
No heirs, yes. Oh, he had some heirs, cousins, like nephews and things like that, but
You know, we were talking about Newton and how he was with the Bank of England making
Yeah.
all the money. They still represent Newton today with the English £2 coins. And they have a quote from him on the regular £2 bimetallic coin, which says, "Standing on the shoulders of
giants.
giants." Yeah.
That's right. That's what he said. I've only stood on the shoulders of giants, but